I apologize for not having a pop filter last week. Or I could tell the difference. I didn't think about it, but I wasn't going to pack it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect to. A couple of times I've had to use the backup mic. I haven't always had a pop filter either, and I could tell the difference. But
I haven't been able to notice it, but I could definitely tell that I didn't have one because my P's were popping last time.
The one that you have, is it similar to the one that I've got that's on an arm, circular disc, sits in front of the mic, or do you have like one of the pieces that actually sits on the mic itself?
No, I have the circular arm on. I have the circular pop filter on an arm that it attaches to the boom arm.
Yeah, I thought so. I know that one of the things that I did with the blue microphone, I have the circular pop filter, but I also have the just stretchy piece that sits over top the microphone itself, so that theoretically I could slim down what I needed to carry if I needed to be mobile and still have at least some semblance of a filter. I think it's technically a windscreen filter is what they refer to it as, but same general principle.
Do you have the floaty thing? I can't remember what they're called, but it basically isolates the microphone from vibrations.
Yes, the shock mount.
Thank you. Shock mount.
Yeah, that only works with the boom arm. Well, I guess I could probably make it work with the stand if I really wanted to, but the intended use is on the boom arms.
Right. Have you noticed that it makes a difference?
Not in my normal use, but I'm also not really moving around or bumping things very often.
Yeah, that's what
I would imagine it would make more of a difference if I were attaching it to a desk and trying to use something on the desk at the same time.
That makes sense as well. Have you ever used your boom arm for something else?
Not so far.
I have used it to take pictures because it's the same screw hole. The same mounting hole is the same as that you'd use for a camera, and I've used it to mount I have the glyph. I think it's a Neat Studio that makes the glyph.
Sounds familiar. I know the glyph. I don't know for sure the manufacturer.
They're the ones that make the Highball app, and they made some
Studio Neat.
Studio Neat. Thank you. What did I say?
Neat Studio.
I was, putting the cart before the horse. They make the glyph, and I have a glyph, and it's the same mounting. It's the same thread size as it's the same. I guess there's an industry standard for cameras, and it's the same for the microphone, I guess, or at least my microphone. So potentially, I could use any of my camera tripods to mount a microphone. But
yeah, they're fairly universal because you also a lot of times will use light stands and everything for like shotgun mics if you're setting up audio recording for a set.
Can we talk about this term universal?
Sure.
So it's a semantic thing for me, but it's like I notice it and I'm just like, universal. We don't know that other intelligent life forms in the universe have the same mount.
Does it technically share the same root meaning?
Universal?
Yeah, like what? So I get you're comparing it to universe, but is universal actually technically the same root from the perspective of how it was conceived or conceptualized? Meaning,
yeah,
it's relatively ubiquitous, another way to say it, but is it meant in a way that it's universal as far as the known universe is concerned, or universal for the known adoption of that particular craft?
I don't believe it matters at this point now that universe represents a defined area in the cosmos.
But it also represents a defined area in relatively different sizes and shapes and spheres of influence.
I'm not even sure that it's global. Like I feel like people say universal and they mean global. Now, I don't usually pick it out like this, but this is what this show is for sometimes.
Yeah, I have no problem with it.
Oh, I know you don't, and I know you enjoy a good discussion on semantics as well. So, and I know that you will love to, play devil's advocate.
But I do think it's relatively global. I can't think of any manufacturer that purports to use the same general standards or be able to interconnect with other manufacturers' equipment that uses something proprietary. There are obviously proprietary use cases for, different manufacturers for their products.
Right. So proprietary, indicates that it's not going to be, global.
Universal.
Yeah, I was about to say it. I was about to do it. See, it's part of the lexicon. So, but, does North Korea have a different standard? Does China? China's a relatively large market, and they do have different standards for things. Like the iPhone that you buy in China is not the same as you buy in the rest of the world. So,
yeah, I certainly couldn't state unequivocally that it is the case, but I do know
it's an industry standard.
Right. It's a lot like a USB connector or something where you may choose to implement something different and it's no longer considered whatever the standard is, and that's fine. But most people are going to judge your product based on interoperability with the standard.
Perhaps Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
So it's not USB, but it does support USB. So that one's like extra. It's extra. This should all go in the show.
Oh, I figured. Only because I saw that you had placed the pop filter thing in the follow-up section.
Yeah.
If not for that, I would have thought we were just kind of...
Yeah.
Speaking of, though, I saw you had something else in the follow-up section.
Yeah. I want to know who Koala Media is. Or is Koala Media Facebook? Like, that's where I went.
I didn't even recognize the Koala Media just from a naming perspective.
Well, it was a made-up name for the article because he didn't want to say who. He didn't want the name of the company that he worked for revealed.
Oh, okay. Now I'm
sorry
on board. Yeah, so I read that article whenever it was published, so it's been a bit, and so I didn't recall that was specifically what was stated.
Yeah, we talked about it last recording. Because you brought it up last recording because he came public.
Right.
And just so that...
yeah, but the article itself was dated even some time ago. Like I mentioned it last recording just because I was curious if you had seen it.
Yeah, just so that... Yeah, it actually looks like it came out in October of 21. So just so the listeners know, it's last show... We talked about HackerX.
Well, we talked about propaganda, and I mentioned...
Well, you got started with talking about this article about HackerX revealing himself.
Right.
But he wouldn't reveal the company that he worked for, and so the Ars Technica article called the company... They explicitly said Koala Media is a made-up company. But like when I was reading it, I was like... It was hard not for me to think, is this Facebook?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I didn't go digging, but who owns One America News? Do you know?
I don't know, and I don't think that this guy would probably have it on his LinkedIn profile either.
Probably not. But I was just thinking that a lot of the stuff that gets shared that I've seen either via OAN or an affiliate that seems to reference OAN kind of fits the bill for the way the article described the chain of publication. So I wouldn't necessarily think it's Facebook specifically as much as something that feeds into Facebook. Like I absolutely know that Facebook would have been a huge distribution channel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I don't think it's a source in this scenario.
That's more plausible, but it was more interesting in my head to think about it as Facebook. Not that it really matters, because Facebook was you could say Facebook was the river that they sent their boats of bullshit down.
Yeah, that's a fairly good analogy.
Yeah. And it also made me, there's one other point that I wanted to bring up about it, but now it has left my mind.
We can certainly pause for a second. You can think about it, or we can come back to it if it resurfaces.
Are you going to put some cool guitar music here?
Sure. Anytime I have to do a cut where it doesn't seem like it's quite seamless, I use it.
Oh, we need one of the. We need because it's kind of like a funky guitar. I want to hear it like every once in, like maybe one time, like a shred, like a good electric shred.
I've thought about maybe commissioning somebody to perform a riff. Like my brother plays. It wouldn't be difficult for me to get him to come over and set up the gear, since I have everything that I need to record, and just have him play some different things and see what's usable. I just haven't. I've been kind of lazy about it, for one. And two, I'm slowly getting better at teaching myself to play. And I keep keeping this fantasy that maybe by the end of the year, I'll be able to play a riff in a way to record it that I like. I don't know that I'm on track for that yet, but at the moment, it's kind of the motivation for continuing to go back at it.
I've had the same thought. My brother-in-law is a proficient guitarist, and sometimes he amuses me. He's like, "Hand me that gitter," or he'll call it his paddle. That's another one. But he taught himself on the Smashing Pumpkins, so he comes from that background. But he's a good guitar player, and I've thought about asking him to put together some stuff.
Yeah, I find my main issue, not to take us on a tangent, but this is also another topic that I thought about putting in the show notes, which is surrounding just mental state and motivation. One of the things I keep finding frustrating is that I don't progress very quickly, or I feel like I don't progress quickly. And I had the same general frustration when I started the health and fitness kick that I started back in 2020. And I keep reminding myself that it doesn't matter if I don't feel like I'm getting to where I want to be in a week. What matters is that I'm better than I was yesterday. And it's a lot more difficult to do that with the guitar for some reason than it was to remind myself of that when it came to whatever workout I was doing at the time. Just a fascinating contrast of how you can have the right mentality, you can show that you've achieved it over dedication for time, and still be impatient as hell on something else.
Right. I mean, if you practice 30 minutes a day for a year, you would be way better at the end of the year than you would be at the beginning of the year. And that amounts to like a little over 180 hours, and a week is 168 hours. But if you were to play or try to practice 168 hours in a row, you wouldn't be the same you wouldn't be as good after a week as you would be playing 30 minutes a day after a year.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
And the other thing to factor in is that just like figuring out the fitness piece, like it took a little bit to really get a schedule in that didn't interfere with other things that are priorities as well. And I'm still juggling with that a little bit with the number of things that I'm trying to fit in. And so eventually, over the next few weeks, I'm going to have to finally decide what gets cut for a bit. And I'm just not at a point that I'm willing to cut a endeavor completely yet. I'm getting there. Like I know this logically. It's just I have an emotional attachment to each of these endeavors. I'm not quite ready to trim them.
I know what you mean. I had just this conversation with Becca earlier today, and sort of committed to doing something like, actually taking care of like certain responsibilities that need to take care of instead of going kayaking every day in the summer or whatever, every weekend. So I get it.
I think we can go back to it in a bit if need be, but I think what I finally kind of settled on is being willing to accept slightly slower progress and picking two of the endeavors that I really want to continue with. And so, like, instead of practicing every day, I would practice every other day, and then interspersed on those opposite days, I would work on the other endeavor. That way I don't have to necessarily give all of my desired projects up or try to fit, all of them into a day. Basically figuring out what kind of compromise makes sense. And I'm getting close to, I think, settling on something that works well. And technically will afford more time to both endeavors than I give them currently, because I'm trying to fit so much in the first place. But
that's fair. That's actually, it's one of those things. It's like sometimes we think about let's take care of the the easy stuff first and knock that out of the way. But sometimes you've got to remember what's the thing that's going to make the most impact, and maybe the impact of that thing takes care of those like quote unquote low hanging fruit that you thought you should get out of the way first. So there's a balance to be struck there.
Yeah, I feel like we could do an entire show on that if we really expanded it, but I feel like there's another topic that I want to get into just based on current affairs that's more pressing.
Yeah, I remember what it was that I was going to say, and I'm going to ask So another guitar riff, and we talk about the Ukraine.
Yes, I do. I do want to talk about Ukraine. I want to preface that though with a number of different statements, and I want to jump into the Bytes before we do. But if you had something tied to what you were going to say that feeds into that, then this would be the place for
No.
Okay. But since you mentioned you remembered what you were going to say, I wanted to make sure we gave the opportunity to do so.
Oh, it was just that. Are we going to talk about the Ukraine for a moment?
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Is it Ukraine or the Ukraine? Or
I've gone back and forth. I would love to have a native weigh in and tell us correctly how the Ukrainian people speak of the country and themselves. I doubt anybody's going to be paying attention to our podcast at the moment, though.
Well, it would be in Russian. Or Ukrainian, rather. Actually, it would be in Ukrainian.
Yeah, I know there are differences. So because there's a lot to unpack there. Before we go down that rabbit hole, there were two quick things I just wanted to mention as bites for this week.
Yes.
One, I've seen headlines pop up a number of times about the vaccine efficacy in the 5 to 11 age group waning fairly dramatically, fairly quickly. And while true, I'm not disputing that. Even back in December of 2021, there was publicly available information indicating that, yes, we know protection from infection wanes quickly, which is why we're continuing trials for boosters.
Right.
But we also know that even though protection from severe illness also wanes, it does still prove fairly effective. And so it was a logical course of action to approve the initial regimen of the Pfizer vaccine for that age group.
Yeah, they also seem to be slightly less susceptible to the disease or the infection taking major control, but not entirely
right. And so And so I just wanted to mention that while it seems like people are latching on to this news from a new slate of articles as being relatively breaking, it's not. The discussion's been there for a little while. Yes, it sucks for, and we would love for the vaccine efficacy to mirror that seen in adults and older age groups, but we have to remember that all the age groups are different for a reason as well. So this is just continuation of the same thing that we saw with the initial release of the vaccines and testing and eventual recommendation of a booster, which seems to be the course of action that is probably going to unfold for children as well. The other one is kind of similar. Have you seen the headlines about leftovers that were not refrigerated appropriately, leading to some severe illness, and then a teenager having to have limbs amputated?
I mean, I saw it when you put it in these show notes. So yeah, this afternoon I saw it.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it reported a couple of different places, and it was actually in the context of the leftovers caused the problem, and so I copied this link in just to clear up anything for those who might be listening. No, the leftovers didn't cause the teen's life-threatening infection. Medical experts have called out the current batch of news articles as incorrect, to put it nicely. The person in question suffered a rare and extremely severe complication from a blood infection with a bacterium that causes meningococcal disease. The bacterium is not foodborne, and its incubation period is longer than just a few hours. The reason this got picked up, and the way the article that I'll link in our notes or in the post refers to it, it's the real accident out of all of this is misreading a case record of the condition, which was published more than a year ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. And why that's important, or why that's of note, the New England Journal of Medicine publishes articles in the series that are, they title Case Records of the Massachusetts General Hospital, and they're there to present or to illustrate unusual or puzzling medical cases in an explanatory way for educational purposes. And so the article was basically, or this article was explaining that a misreading of that article caused the current slate of headlines.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's, we like to talk about misinformation and disinformation, and sometimes it's just a matter of you interpret it incorrectly.
Or just, like misreading, where this is not malicious misinformation. This is just
completely accidental.
Right,
and
accidental.
Just, yeah.
So
with that, now I want to launch into my disclaimer. I have a lot of thoughts on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I want to make sure that I emphasize I am not and have never been in the military. I don't know all of the details that go into play when you talk about organizing different responses versus using sanctions, what we can and can't do legally, what would violate treaties, all of those things I am very much not versed in. So this is the epitome of what we have taglined the show to be. A couple of guys who are talking about things where we acknowledge that we are completely unqualified to present our opinions on some topics, this being one of them. But this is a huge topic. And so on the backside of that disclaimer, I want to also include a plea for feedback and information. If you do listen and you know some of these details and can provide some guidance or pointers or any clear explainers on why some actions might be taken versus others, I genuinely would love to hear that. And there'll be plenty of options for how to contact us at the end of the show, like usual. And so that gets the disclaimer I wanted to make sure was present out of the way. Do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Well, first of all, I think about pretty much any time Ukraine is mentioned, but especially in the context of war or this invasion, I think about a scene from Seinfeld. Do you know the scene?
I do.
It's a scene where Kramer and Newman are playing Risk, and Kramer's going to invade in the game of Risk Ukraine. And he's like, Ukraine is weak. Ukraine is feeble. And there's a Ukrainian man standing next to him on the subway. And if you want to know why they're playing on the subway, watch the episode. I'll see if I can't find it. But the Ukrainian man is like, Ukraine is not weak. He's like, this is a game, buddy. He's like, Ukraine is a game to you. I love that scene. And
yeah, I'm going to have to. I saw that clip not too long ago. I'll have to find it and at least interject the audio.
That's what I was. Yeah, I made a note.
Good.
Are you sure you know where the impound yard is?
Oh, stop stalling. Come on.
I can't think. It's all this noise.
Or is it because I've built a stronghold around Greenland? I've driven you out of Western Europe? And I've left you teetering on the brink of complete annihilation.
I'm not beaten yet. I still have armies in the Ukraine.
The Ukraine. You know what the Ukraine is? It's a sitting duck. A road apple, Newman. The Ukraine is weak. It's feeble. I think it's time to put the hurt on the Ukraine.
I come from Ukraine. You not say Ukraine weak?
Yeah, well, we're playing a game here, pal.
Ukraine is came to you? How about I take your little bonus?
And there have been plenty of memes and things that I've loved seeing that also express just how absolutely inspiring it has been to see the Ukrainian people resist oppression, for lack of better phrasing, but resist Russian forces en masse. I mean, it's complete, very, I don't even have the words to describe how remarkable it's been to see the way in which the country is unified to defend itself. And so just to put it very clearly, cannot even fathom that choice at the moment, right? I've never been in a situation where I have felt like that was a choice that I had to make. And it's remarkable to see that choice play out. And it's unfortunate as well. I don't want to, glorify it necessarily from the perspective of making it seem like it's this great thing either. It's absolutely unfortunate that that choice has to be made. What I'm getting at, though, is that it's so cohesive and so strong that it really is absolutely a remarkable display of what it means to be unified as a country. And I think why I find it so remarkable is because of how divided we are in this country. Because I would not expect the same response in the United States at the moment. By a long shot.
It's one of those things. We have a lot of infighting going on here, but I expect that if there was some sort of external force that was like in a similar nature, I think you would see maybe faux unification in this country. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but there's a level of genuineness and sincerity that I observe from the Ukrainian people that I just don't know would exist here. I would hope that it would, for sure, but there is definitely something to be said for just that, right? Like I don't even have a good way to put it.
The only frame of reference I can think of in our lifetime would have been September 11th, 2001, and the aftermath of that.
Yeah, and it's so dissimilar that it's tough to imagine what that would be extrapolated to look like on a larger scale. But I also don't want to necessarily go down an attempt at comparison. You know, it's the things, like there are so many things I want to talk about, and I don't know how to talk about them, that it makes it that much more difficult to even phrase what I have in mind.
Well, I was going to say that event happened 20 years ago, and who knows if we'd be able to, like there was a level of unification that happened after that in this country. Who knows that would be replicated if something similar happened again today with the fracturing that we have here. But that's the only frame of reference that I have in my lifetime for like a positive level of unification based on an adverse event. But, you know, I think it's also important, you know, to go back to this, the Ukrainian people. I think it's also important to point out the Russian people, the Russians that are protesting in their own country for risking arrests and incarceration.
Persecution.
Yeah, they are also not happy about this, and I really think that's something I can really appreciate.
And I've seen reports, and there's so much information that it's really difficult to know how accurate some reports are. But assuming reports are accurate, there are a lot of Russian soldiers who are also protesting by not engaging or halting their movements. There is something to be said for all of those people who are taking whatever stand they can against furthering violence in the region, for sure. And I don't want to sell it short or sell it overly generalized as only Ukrainian people are opposed and every Russian is just blindly following Putin's orders. I absolutely recognize it's more nuanced than that.
Right.
And there are plenty of people who have demonstrated. My understanding is there have been multiple arrests as well of protesters. It's horrifying the scale upon which everything has happened. What I wanted to really kind of focus in on, and this will illustrate my naivete more than most things. Actually, before I make that statement, did you watch the State of the Union by chance?
I didn't. I want to go back and watch it. I didn't realize it was tonight. Okay.
So I did watch most of it. I intentionally flagged it for recording so I could go back and watch it again. One of the things I found interesting is we are sending troops, resources, etc. to NATO countries, and the emphasis was made that we will be defending every inch of those who are within the NATO alliance, those lands and countries. And it was emphasized that we are not sending troops to Ukraine. And I understand there's a lot of reasons that are unknown to me about why. And I have no doubt part of it is the fact that Russia possesses nuclear capabilities, the fact that Ukraine is not a part of NATO, is not a part of the European Union, is not affiliated with organizations that would allow us to say that we are stepping in defense because of whatever shared treaty or structure. But I don't get why.
Well, I think,
Go ahead, because this is where I want to kind of just talk through it and figure out what exactly it is that's hamstringing a more direct response to Putin beyond an economic response, and not to discount the economic response, because it is having fairly profound effects, but why are we so limited to an economic response at the moment?
For us, NATO is because we grew up in the West, and NATO is a post-World War II defense treaty, maybe to really oversimplify it. But for us, it's a form of defense, and a form of alliances on the Western Europe and North America. And then you have a country like Russia, where they see that it is as a form of offense. And if Ukraine was, if Ukraine joined NATO, then they would get NATO funding, NATO weapons, and NATO nations would be able to put their military in Ukraine, and that was just too damn close for Putin. So it was, this is among other things, the Ukrainian borders are somewhat artificial, much like the borders in the Middle East and the borders in Africa. Western European countries defined those borders and didn't give a lot of regard to ethnicities, cultures, languages, and so forth when those borders were defined. So it's kind of there is some sense of reality where the Russian government could say that Ukraine belongs as a part of Russia. But at this point, that time has passed. For better or for worse, war is not the way to progress. These borders incorrectly drawn? Sure. But moving forward with a act of war to rectify that is not the answer.
I was reading through an article that was seeming to trace a number of aspects of the roots of the conflict. I did not get a chance to read the whole thing, and I just kind of scanned highlights. So I bookmarked it to go back into in more detail. But a couple of things caught my attention. One, I don't remember what it was phrased as, but basically the option that NATO left on the table to allow for other countries to join or to petition for joining was specifically targeted for, I believe it was Georgia and the Ukraine originally. Might have extended beyond that, but either way, Georgia and Ukraine were both called out in the article. And so this is why I need to go back and read my details just so I understand what I'm actually talking about. But Georgia was also attacked after expressing interest in joining. Seemed to be one of the big points the article was making, that this is something we have seen in the past and we have not done anything to prevent it.
Yeah, Georgia and Bosnia and Herzegovina are, along with Ukraine, are all aspiring members of NATO, and Putin has demanded that NATO promise never to accept Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and the NATO has refused that. So there's that level of interplay that's happening. Right.
And then I also, just to piggyback on that, I saw a quick headline where there was speculation that one of the Russian ministers, I'm not going to guess that I recall which one correctly, was showing a map where post-invading Ukraine would have been, or it is planned to expand further into Moldova. Did you see anything about that?
I did not, but that seems...
So this is where it goes back to, I made the statement about there are a lot of things that are difficult to confirm. Some of my sources I would not state are sources that I would unequivocally find reputable. Sometimes some of the shadier social media accounts that I watch will also spread information for fun that may or may not be correct. But one of the things that, or one of the reasons I continue to follow those accounts is because it's generally a pretty accurate sounding board for things that are occurring. You just have to figure out to what level of detail is actually serious versus what might be exaggerated a little bit. And I don't have a good feel for that because I had quit really paying attention to a number of those accounts for a while. And for anybody reading between the lines, yes, this is loosely based in following reports from Anonymous and other associated or similar groups. And this is why I don't necessarily put 100% credible, this information is accurate status on what I'm seeing. But one of the things that I did see flow through a couple of times was that a map was drawn that appeared, or a map was shown via some televised or broadcast method that did show plans for expanding via Ukraine into Moldova.
That seems to fit with the things that I've read. So
the other piece of that, and the other reason it makes sense, there was also an article, the same article I initially referenced that I was reading through. There's a person in Washington who has been basically following and analyzing Putin and Russia over the past 30 plus years, who's the foremost expert on the mentality of, or the behaviors and what drives Putin from a advisory standpoint to multiple, series of government iterations at this point. If you think about a career that spans over 30 years providing advisory counsel in Russia, that spans multiple, parties and presidents, etc. And a couple of key things really struck me from what I was reading there. And one was that Putin absolutely believes in this idea of the Russian imperium, which is not to be confused with what the USSR was prior to its dissolution, but what the concept and idea of the Russian Empire was, including those areas they controlled outside of the actual construct of the USSR. And two, if you're going into analyzing something about him and thinking he wouldn't do that,
he would.
You're wrong.
Right, he would do. I mean, he's
yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like at the end of this, for those that, so it's going to be bad for it's already bad for the Ukrainians. There's already been too much blood spilled, but in the end, at the end, I think this is going to be significantly bad for Putin.
So the thing that, to make all this long, winding conversation actually come together, the big question that I really had, and this was something that was mentioned in that article that made me really start to think.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Are we actually in the beginning throes of a third world war?
That's a fucking scary question.
It is, because we lived through the fallout from the Second World War, which crafted the Cold War era, where we were constantly reminded of the threat Russia posed. Whether that was a credible threat or an exaggerated threat, there are plenty of debates there. But the point is that for the larger part of my childhood, we had bomb drills.
Right.
That was completely driven from fallout from a major world war. That's not this, and the scary part isn't that, right? The point that I'm getting to is there's a reason it's a world war, and that's because it has ramifications for the world at large. But it's also because of the sheer scale and magnitude of destruction that occurs during that conflict.
Right.
And that's the part that I feel like that's the part that's missing from the narrative. I feel like there's a lot of attempting to avoid thinking about the ramifications of these actions in a week and trying to instead focus on the current 24 to 72 hour time frame. Because I don't see any path forward and out of this conflict that does not involve a formal declaration of war. And the reason I say that is because I don't see Putin willing to withdraw, regardless of whether he's able to actually achieve any strategic goals during the invasion, and regardless of how long it takes. I don't see him saying, all right, you know what, I'm going to back up. I don't see that in his character. So the logical next step from that is the eventual demise of the Ukraine as a independent country or sovereign country. And I don't see any level of success not breeding continued expansion because of a lack of appropriate forceful response from other countries. Does that make sense, or did I kind of lose you with the back and forth?
No, I just
hadn't thought about it in those contexts.
No, I hadn't.
Like, this is why I wanted to just talk through it, because my mind is whirling with, I don't see a positive outcome here.
No, the issue is that there's nobody supporting Russia on this at all, unless I've missed something. But I know China,
I saw a headline that Mexico was refusing to impose any sanctions. I mean, not necessarily choosing sides, but refusing to go along with other countries and actually actively imposing any type of sanctions on Russia. That's the closest I've seen to support.
Yeah, that's. I wouldn't call that support. It's more like I don't really want to be a part of this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just
not a
illustrating
good signal.
Right. I'm illustrating that that's the closest I've seen to any level of support. I have not seen anything that has come across my radar that is supportive of Putin's actions.
Like, who would support that? Would North Korea support that? I don't know. North Korea is pretty close to Russia, and I don't know what their relationship
I think
is.
it's telling that there's not been a public statement of any type of support from North Korea or China.
Well, I thought I thought China was opposed to this move from Russia.
There's the last thing that I saw was that there was opposition to these moves from China as well. I did not read details. I just assumed or I trusted that the headline conveyed the gist.
Yes. I feel like, so about Mexico, I feel like that's probably worse on them than it will be for Russia.
Oh, for sure. And to be fair, like, Mexico has also been at odds with the United States over the past few years for what I sure any astute listener would understand is the posturing and brashness of the ridiculous figure that we elected president, or that the majority of Americans elected president, I guess is how I should say it.
I wouldn't even say the majority of Americans. It's how the president. I don't. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I
the man who
acknowledge
became
that
president.
he was elected. Yeah, and he was very abrasive toward our neighbors to the south, and I can't fault anybody in Mexico's leadership not harboring some resentment there.
I don't disagree.
And that's not to say that that's the cause of it for either, because my understanding is that Mexico's president is more leaning kind of that direction in general about not agreeing with a number of U.S. approaches to international relations regardless of president. But I didn't read enough background to know if that's because of the previous administration or if that's a long-standing thing. So
I mean, either way.
Yeah, the previous administration didn't do us any favors for sure.
Right. And Mexico not imposing sanctions is not a big, it's not going to make or break anything here. So
that's a nice way of putting it.
But I mean,
I don't want to sound like I'm being mean to Mexico. I'm really not. I love the country for a number of different reasons, but I have to laugh.
Yeah. It's one of those things where not to go too far off of this, but it's one of those things where if you're a Mexican, how can you not look at the United States and not just laugh out of laugh at us because you don't know what other response to have, because we're all over here high and mighty talking about how the Mexican government is corrupt and they have all these problems in Mexico, and look at our goddamn government.
Yeah, for sure.
It is, I mean, we are so the pot calling the kettle black. So, anyway, not to digress that much. I felt like for well, I don't want to joke too hard on Germany, but they weren't they had an about face regarding the invasion, and it's not that Germany doesn't love a good world war, but Germany today is very different than it was 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 100 years ago with the first one. And I found it amusing that Switzerland, who has wanted to stay out of all of it, was like, nope, not okay with this. So I found those two things kind of amusing.
That was such a big thing when I saw that. For anyone who even pays attention to really high level just international relations, if you ever saw anything about Switzerland saying, you know what, that's bad, like that, you crossed a line 20 years ago to set you on the path to get to the point where you made the Swiss mad at you. It's completely unfathomable to us, because for our entire lifetime, the Swiss have remained neutral.
The Swiss have been, we will give you cheese, we will give you chocolate, and we will give you knives to cut those things. Put your money in our banks, and we're good to go. Make us, we'll get rich that way. But and we're just gonna stay out of all the other stuff. And for them to step in and be like, nope, not okay with this, kind of amusing.
And not to forget to mention, the Netherlands has historically been fairly neutral. They've also not announced sanctions or at least actions against this invasion. I believe Finland was the other one. I know there was one other one, and I don't want to necessarily misrepresent a nationality. I apologize for not doing my research in advance, but I know 3 historically neutral countries have chipped in on the side of anti-Russian actions, and that's historic in and of itself.
To be fair, Russia wasn't too nice to them in the last World War.
Well, and realistically, this is part of why during the previous part of the conversation, I quit saying Russian in general. It's Putin.
That's fair, because it's like we don't talk about, regarding World War II, we don't talk about Germany. We talk about Nazi Germany. That's a different thing than Germany. And I think it's fair for you to call that out and say, this is not Russia. This is not what Russians want. This is what Putin wants. It's what the Putin-led government wants, not the Russian people. Because it seems, well, I don't know the Russian people, but it seems there's quite an outcry from them that quite a large group of them don't agree with this. So, and that's no surprise, because Putin's kind of a dick. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap. I'm going to probably cut it there, to be honest. I like that as an ending.
Me too.
I couldn't even stifle a laugh for a pause.
Yeah, leave the laugh in. I now remember the other thing that I was going to say, and I didn't realize it. And you can have a one sentence after show, and that is, or you can even throw this in after the normal thing, and really mess with the listeners' heads. But
that's probably what I'll do.
And I'll leave a pause so you can get a clean thing, a clean audio segment. And that is, this country, the United States, has a conservative party, and they're called Democrats. And then there's this other party of this alt-right, neo-Nazi, white supremacist party that's just, I don't know what to think about them. That wasn't crafted well. I'll save it for next time.
That's fine. I know where you're going with it. I mean, it blends. There's a reason in the show notes I couldn't bring myself to remove critical race theory as a potential topic as well, because it's all intertwined.
Yeah.
The same fuckers who are applauding Putin in various forms, talking about it being genius or whatever, are the same fuckers who think critical race theory is a problem.
Yeah, we should talk about critical race theory next week. I mean, how many people that are opposed to critical race theory actually know what the fuck it is?
None.
Right.
None. I have no hesitation unequivocally stating that to be fact. If you can find me someone who rails against critical race theory who can actually state what it is, I'll come up with something. I'll make sure I have a good bet for when we do next week's episode. Like I don't know, no, that wouldn't be good enough. Like I may need help coming up with a good bet, but I will make sure that I have a good bet on hand. Like, I'll streak across a football field or something. Who knows? Like we'll find something.